Oh, hello everyone, and thank you for listening to Fire Breathing Rob. If you're listening to us on the YouTube channel, thanks so much. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We're really building on that. We're trying to push that right now. If you're listening to us on another platform, thanks so much. And definitely share and like these videos. They're with amazing people that have amazing stories to tell, and it's from all over different parts of the country, and we even have people from different parts of the world. So thanks so much for listening. This is Heather Lende, and she is in Alaska right now, and she had written a book, and we're going to talk about that book and Alaska politics in general. And the book is called Of Beers and Ballots. That's Bears, not Beers. And I know I have a little bit of an accent, so some people can't distinguish that, but it's Of Beers and Ballots, and it is about an Alaskan adventure in small town politics. So, Heather, thanks so much for coming on and talking to us today. I greatly appreciate the time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And we are going to talk about the book. And as I said, and the viewers didn't hear this, but as I said to Heather before, I do want to talk about the Pebble Mine. I think that's a huge issue. And as we do have a lot of people and have done many stories in general about environmental issues, I'm sure the viewers will really enjoy your take on that and what's going on. Because we know Alaska is such an American treasure as far as its environment in general. So, Heather, first of all, before we kick the book around, how long have you been living in Alaska?
For about, 36, 37 years, I think
Oh,
now. My second daughter was born in Haines. So my kids are 36 and 37 and they were born here.
okay. So you've been in Alaska for quite a long time. So can you talk about Haines in that area of Alaska in general?
Yes, we're on the inside passage where the cruise ships go. So if you've seen
Okay.
those pictures of the cruises, we're in between Juneau and Skagway. We don't get quite as many ships as those ports do, but a lot of them sail right by. And we get about one a week here. It's a very beautiful, looks like Switzerland with a beach, I guess, and very small community and isolated. You can take a ferry or fly in. You can actually drive from the lower 48, but you have to go all the way up the Alcan Highway and through the Yukon and back down again. The Alaska-British Columbia border is 40 miles out of town, but the road goes through one of the largest wilderness areas in the world.
Now you lived in a different state before this then, correct?
Yes, I grew up in New York,
Oh, okay.
Long Island, and
Wow.
went to college in Vermont, and that's where I met my husband. And we got married young, and he's a forester, and he wanted to see Alaska, so we bought a pickup truck and drove here, and we're still here.
Okay, so now let's kick this around. So let's talk to the viewers a little bit about Alaska politics. We do have, and I do have a lot of political stories on this show, but not so much talk about Alaska politics. We hear about in the presidential election, it's mostly a Republican state. And most of the people, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you lived there, not me. I believe the last Democratic senator was Dan Bingham. I forgot how to say his last name.
Begich, I think it's Mark
Begich.
Begich was the
Mark
last one.
Begich, not
Yeah,
Dan. I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Mark Begich. And I think what did he? He ran not recently too for another position.
For governor, but
Yes.
he didn't make it, I don't think. No.
Right. So
For governor.
right. So with Mark Begich as the senator a little while back, but not too long ago, and obviously he's still in politics like now, but we don't hear a lot of Democrats as far as in the state of Alaska, rather. Can you talk about the political realm of Alaska in general? Is it mostly pretty much Republican and as far
Well,
as
it's
that goes?
complicated, actually.
Sure.
Alaska is, it's a huge state geographically,
Right.
but the population center is really in the south central part of the state around Anchorage, Kenai, Fairbanks, the area that we call the rail belt, because there's a train that runs through those communities.
Okay.
And that area is pretty red.
Mm.
The rural Alaska, where I live and all kind of around the edges, tends to be blue. But we have much smaller part of the population. So the rural representatives, like for instance, in the state legislature, the representatives from our community are Democrats. and from many rural communities they are, but the urban, Anchorage urban areas are all red, and there's more of them than us. But in terms of that doesn't really describe the Alaska electorate, because about 60% or so of Alaskans are non-affiliated, very independent, like you'd figure. So, you know, in general, like even right now, on the national level, we have Al Gross is running against incumbent Dan Sullivan, and Al is non-affiliated, but he's running on the Democratic ticket because the primary let him in. Same with Elise Galvin is running for Congress against Don Young, and she too is not a Democrat, she's unaffiliated. That's kind of what happens here. And it's funny because you're talking about politics. I got a note from, this is sweet. This is from Senator Lisa Murkowski this last week. I got a note of Bears and Ballots, my book about small town Alaska politics. And she wrote that it's not as different from what happens in Washington, D.C. as most would think, just on a different scale. And she said, I loved your description of the Haines electorate as violet with red and blue highlights. And how you describe the interaction and diversity of views in your highly engaged community. So, you know, Alaska is small enough that the senator from Alaska, we call her Lisa, and she sends me a note and actually read the book and said Haines is sort of like Washington. So,
Heather, I want to go into the book now. So let's talk about the book. And it talks about 2016. A lot of people think about 2016 and they have these horrific memories about Donald Trump winning. We saw the Women's March. Was that one of the reasons why you decided to run? Was that one of the reasons why you even decided to write the book in general?
I decided to run, you know, because I, like everybody in the country, was sort of glued to this race between the first woman that was going to be president and this man that you thought, you know, impossible that anybody would vote for him, especially a woman. I mean, I was like, well, wow. And I was emboldened by that. And I've lived in Haines a long time. I've been involved in the community in all kinds of ways. I'm not a politician. I you know, my other books are all family and life. I write obituaries. I'm like just a regular grandma, and my kids had all grown up, and I thought, well, I'm going to run. And when I run, I'm going to be really honest. I'm not a politician. So I'm just going to say, like, when asked about that particular mine, no, don't think it's a good idea. And then I figured if people wanted, you know, supported that view, and they all know who I am. I mean, my life is literally an open book in Haines. They'd vote for me. And if they didn't agree with me, they wouldn't. And they did. So I thought, well, you know, that's good then. I didn't trick anybody with political ease. And the other person that won the election was the local editor of the Chilkat Valley News, my friend Tom, who I work with as an obit writer. And we defeated several very conservative candidates, you know, make Haines great again, go back to logging and mining. And then Trump won, and it was really, in many ways, it was kind of like a setup, like, we were just, that group then was empowered, the wrong people voted, and we had a lot of things here that kind of mirrored the national one, but a little backwards, because the progressive one, but then the backlash was so strong on the other side for a while. And so the book is really, you know, about me learning more about my community in that way, about politics of Haines either drifting up or national politics drifting down, because we've always been pretty contentious here and involved. And I just thought it was worth sharing. I think the biggest lessons in the book for me come from, you know, having to work together with people who, you know, may disagree ideologically on big stuff like mines or timber sales or whatever, or whether the library should be open on the weekends, you know, if that's worth paying for. So, but that we still have to get along because we live in a small town. Our kids go to school together, or now grandchildren go to school together. You know, we own a lumberyard. They have to, you know, buy wood at our lumberyard, and we have to help them build projects. And so there's this kind of lessons in humility that I think may carry on as we go through this election cycle. I mean, how are we going to heal some of this stuff? And, on a interesting sort of a side note, I just was talking yesterday, I got to do a talk on an initiative in Alaska that I support. And I'm usually, again, not super political, but it's about ranked choice voting. So we can get rid of the party issues. And I just said, in Haines, when we run for office, we don't run on party. I don't know what anybody's party is. There's no, I kind of guess if they're conservative but who knows? They're Libertarian, Tea Party, Green Party, I don't know. And that's no one ever even asked me. And so what we try to do though is, work for the common good and especially in state politics and national politics, we'd really like to have ranked choice voting, I think. And I think that will make everybody, that you won't be able to anymore basically run and say, this is what I think, and, I'm going to put the hammer down on the rest of you. You want to get the second choice or the third choice, so you have to keep listening to people. And I think that's a really positive change that could help, especially as we go forward, and hopefully with a new way of being, but that we won't end up having the other side now just hammer on the side that just got done, because then we're back in the same mess.
How was the race in general? Do you feel like that there was, I know you said the person that you were friendly with, they also won, and you knocked out two real people way to the right. As far as that goes, so was it a contentious race? Was it very, not relaxed, but go ahead.
Yes and no. It's small. Haines is a small town, so people knew us. But sure. Whenever you start to talk about politics in 2016, now, it's almost everything is contentious, and there were people that at the very end, for instance, the man that ended up running a recall election against Tom and I, and a third assembly member, a local artist, of course. He announced, right before the election, he put a bunch of flyers in the mail about, these people want to turn Haines into a park, and they're just a bunch of hippies from Mud Bay Road, and all this stuff, and don't you dare vote for him, and we've got to save our town, and so that was kind of crummy. And then that kept going for nearly 9 months. The first election happened in October, and the second one happened in August. And I think the hardest, really, for me, it was kind of heartbreaking that, it was that there's some funny stories in it, and there's some sad stories, and there's just some stories about what it's like to serve as a, volunteer, essentially, a lawmaker in your hometown, and be up against the kind of tactics that are, closed Facebook pages, and, they're going to take away your guns and your snow machines. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, we hunt and have guns. And not that, they're in the safe in the basement, and but we're deer hunters and moose hunters, and, that's how and so anyway, it was hard that many of my neighbors signed a petition to and you knew their names, you could see them. And but the election the second time, actually, all three of us got more votes than we did the first time. So it was nice to know the community rejected those kind of politics. And the other lesson in it, I think now even more, is that, okay, that happened in the first 9 months, and I still had another 2 years and 3 months to serve. And those same people were still at every meeting, and they're in the front row, and also they're on committees or commissions, and I have to work with them. And
so how do you work with people like this? Sorry to interrupt you, Heather, but how do you work with people like that they're, it doesn't matter if you beat them about 25 million times, they're still going to keep coming to the meetings and consistently just going right after you every day. And it's got to be really tiresome and burn you out.
It is. I didn't run again. But, at the same time, I think part of that is in a small town, you have to do that too, I mean,
Right.
I'd have to go, pay my phone bill, and the clerk at the counter at the phone company is married to one of the people running the recall, and I have to say, hi, here's my bill. Oh, how are you? How's the new puppy? Da da da. And then we go out the door, and it's like, ah. But if I'm mean because of politics to someone who's being pleasant to me, even if her husband's not being so, I mean, that kind of stuff we have to do all the time. And I came to the conclusion, and I know people don't always like to hear this really, but you have to, in politics and in life, you have to accept apologies that are never given, and forgive people who never ask you to. And that's the only way we're going to keep going. And even the guy who tortured me really with the recall, we had to sit in meetings and talk about the structure of a freight dock, for instance. And he knows a lot about that. And we agreed on which option we should choose that was the most affordable and would meet the needs. My dogs are barking.
Yeah. I saw a beautiful dog come in. It looked like a golden retriever.
Yeah, that's what they
Sat
are.
down before. Oh, that's
I
him.
have I live right on the Chilkat River on the beach here, and it's low tide, and it's mid-morning here, and people are walking their dogs by. So that's
okay. It's okay. Anyway, I do want to get into, while you were serving, what do you feel like were the biggest accomplishments that you made as far as serving in that capacity?
I think for me, the biggest things were trying to bring some civility into the meetings, and being nice to people even when they were just screaming at us, and not losing my temper and just leaving the meeting and throwing something at somebody and telling them all to do something physically impossible. I might, when I got home, I'd get mad, but I think that was a big one. And I think we hired good people. I think that often is missed when you talk about politics, but the politicians are sort of fleeting. You might serve one term, you might serve two, whatever. But when you hire a manager, or you hire a public works director or a police chief, or these things, those jobs keep going. And those people might be there for 30 years, and they end up, and they're public servants too. I mean, they're getting paid, but they're working for the public. And in many cases, picking some of those people, we hired a really good clerk that made me, I'm really happy she's there, and she's going to be there a while. And so I think that was a really good thing. And I also think bringing attention to the value of recreation. Cuckoo clocks, dogs. I know this.
It's all right. I'm having a good time. So it's
I have 5 children. I have 11 grandchildren, and so it's a family house.
It's a family affair.
Yes, yeah. And my dad is here from New York and could come in the door any minute because my sister and I have a sister that lives here, and we're taking turns with Dad. He's a little elderly, and we were worried that he was home alone during the COVID. And so we've got him. We brought him here for
How has COVID affected Alaska, or even where you are in general?
Oh, it's huge. Masks and everything's shut down. The tourist season didn't happen, which
crushes the economy.
Terrible economic hit. I mean, most of our businesses are mom and pop. Little rafting companies and bike guiding companies and flight seeing. Even it's a guy with a plane. We're not big companies. They're local families with businesses, and it's crushing. Or even we have a lot of local artists and gift shops, our bookstore, things that were sort of non-essential. Nothing happened here. So that's the economic issue has been huge. Health-wise, we've been really lucky in Haines. Skagway has had no COVID cases, none. They're being very, very careful because they really are so dependent on tourism and they want it to come back. Haines, I think we've had a total of 5 or 6 the entire time, but nobody's gotten really sick. Just this week, we have our sort of first little alarm where there's 2 active cases in town. But not requiring hospitalization or anything. But so we're careful. Our kids are going to school, but social distancing. In other parts of Alaska, it's very serious. Out in the native villages in Western Alaska, outside of Nome and Bethel and Kotzebue, up on the Arctic slope. These are very small, close-knit communities without a lot of health care, and it's not good. And in Anchorage, in the Anchorage area, it's not. And it sounds small to the rest of the country, but we had over 500 new cases over the weekend in the state, with a state of 700,000. And it's rising now that we're going indoors, unfortunately. But overall, much of the state response, I think, has been good. I mean, I'm not a fan of our governor, but I think he shut down immediately when it first started. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that his wife is an Alaska Native and grew up in a village in northern Alaska, and heard stories about, the flu pandemic in 1918. And she knew, grandparents and great-grandparents and whole villages that were literally destroyed by flus back in the day. And so Native Alaskans are very susceptible, and I think we take it very seriously.
I have a couple more questions. What do you feel like you want people to get out of the book when they read it?
I think I'd like people to, first of all, get a continued feel for small town Alaska, like all my books. It's really a continuum. If you read all four in order, it kind of tells a story of a time and a place that is really special, and that most people will have no experience of. And I think also maybe the ways in which individuals can contribute to their government, and how to do it, and how to speak to public officials, whether it's a congressman or whether it's your local representative, and what's effective and what isn't. And I think also to understand how important local government is. We get all involved in these big national issues, but the things that affect your daily life are happening at the local level. Yeah. And not just if the toilet flushes and it goes to the sewer plant, but if, social justice issues. How are you hiring people? What are the wages? Do women make less? How come the women working at the library make $12 an hour and the men in public works make $35 an hour? There's issues like that happen in every decision you make. Do you fund an after-school program, a senior citizen program, or do you say, no, we need to give all of our money to, paving a parking lot? Those affect people. And I think you can really do a lot. One person on a local level can really make a difference. And it's much easier than trying to change Washington.
Last question, as a young person myself, but even to talk to young people in general, I personally am a Bernie Sanders supporter, and a lot of people that listen to this are also. A lot of them are disenchanted with Hillary Clinton and what the Democratic Party did to them in 2016, and also they feel cheated as in Iowa, and also all the Democratic candidates coming around Joe Biden together to have him win the nomination, when Bernie, after Nevada, looked like he was going to really take the nomination away, hands down. What would you say to these people, as a person that's worked in politics, that are really disenchanted with the whole political realm in general? You have Biden, who they disagree with, and Trump is a racist narcissist, and he's a misogynist also, with every other ism in the book that he is in general. So what would you tell these people that are really young and they have a long life to live, but they're very disenchanted already at such a young age, as in their 20s and 30s?
Oh, I know. I mean, and I'll tell them they're right. I mean, they're right to be disenchanted. But, what are you going to do with that? And I mean, there's a story in the book about Ray Manicker, for instance. Okay, this might be hopeful. And he was a guy who came to Haines from New York, Jewish, graduated from Columbia, was a Navy veteran, do semaphore, He showed up here in the 1950s to teach French at the high school. This was when we were like a logging rough guy outpost. Ray's teaching French and giving French cooking lessons. Then he starts, and his wife then decides that she needs to start the local conservation. They need a Lynn Canal conservation outfit and a preschool, because of course we have to do that. Get very involved in the library, started the public radio station, was somebody that did that. And he also started our newspaper. He founded the local newspaper as a student newspaper, because he said all the decisions were being made down at the coffee shop and the bars, and he wanted to put it in the paper. And people would come to him and say, "You can't put that." And he said, "You said it. I quoted it." Yeah, but you can't put it in the paper. But you said it at the city council meeting or whatever. And anyway, the story of Ray is he ran for borough assembly, the place that I was. 7 terms he served, 24 years. He was often the only, yes vote or no vote. He was always on the outs, but he stayed in there. And I would argue that he had a greater influence in the long term over progressive Haines than all those other captains of industry that were in there. That, there's no sawmills anymore. There's, the businesses that they started, people don't even remember. I know from writing obituaries, but the things that Ray championed are still here. We have a 40,000 acre eagle preserve that he made happen in large part, in his efforts. The radio station is still here. The local players group is still here. The preschool, all of those things. And I think you have to learn that maybe it's a long game. And if you're not in the room, then you're really not going to have a voice. And I would say start at the local level and change it up, rather than, I don't know how you start with Congress or, vote. Obviously, maybe Joe Biden isn't the first choice, but come on, please.
No, I hear you.
Don't not already vote and let Donald Trump win. Really, that would just be a crisis of a magnitude I can't even talk about. And I also just would give some hope about the Supreme Court justice now. And I know everybody's very upset about that, but I will say, as the mother of 5 children, some biological, some not, and that I am a very different person than when I was 40 something and had my kids at home and knew everything. And I've seen many of my friends in Haines, one family in particular, very evangelical Christian, big family just like hers, used to be just straight and narrow. Then their kids grow up and maybe somebody comes out as gay. Maybe somebody smokes some pot. Maybe somebody gets in a little trouble. Suddenly their worldview changes, and it changes big. And people with generous hearts who are kind can change. And I know nobody wants to hear that right now, and it's all very unfair, but I just don't give up hope. After living in a small town for many years, I have seen people change, and I have. And so I know that it's possible.
Well, as we end the interview, Heather, you taught us so much, not just about your run for office, you doing all these things as far as, and I agree with you, putting these people in charge that they could live out your term, or how many terms you ever do. They could be in charge for quite a long time. These are the people you need to watch and make sure get in, and that are the right people that are getting in. But, you taught us a lot about Alaska, but the thing that really gets me, that you spoke about a little bit, but I want you to kind of extend on, is that the rural part of Alaska is more progressive than the big population centers, which is incredible to me because, I'm in Florida right now, right near Disney, about 12 miles from Disney World. And we look at and even in other states in the lower 48, a lot of those states where the big population centers are, those are the progressive areas, whereas the rural areas are the ones that voted for Donald Trump. How do you feel that why is it so different, Alaska, I guess, from the lower 48 as far as that sense?
I think it's because the people in the rural areas, in the first place, are very dependent on the land. We're very based in the place. It's hard to live in rural Alaska, and so we care deeply about it. It would be easier to make more money to move to Anchorage or whatever, for people. There's more jobs. There's lots of people in rural Alaska that don't really have careers. They work. You do what you need to do to get by, and your career is the life you lead and the involvement you have in the community, the way you raise your family, interact with your friends, whatever. But you pick a place and you're there. And so by nature, they tend to be a little more progressive. There's also, I think, when you live in, at least in Alaska, the way it works, in rural Alaska, we're so isolated and we're so dependent on each other that we're kinder. We're not just like pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We're like, hey, this family, they just got in a car wreck and they don't have any health insurance, and we're going to have a fundraiser at the Legion, and we're going to raise $30,000 in a town that doesn't have any money to pay their bills, and no one says, what, wait a minute, they didn't work and they had this and their father does this or that. It's like, look, we know these people, we love them, we're going to take care of them. We're not going to blame them for the situation they're in. And also what's happened, I think, and there's lots of people that might be better at this. I'm not the expert on it or anything, but up north in there, we had a big influx of people who worked in the oil field industry and came from, Oklahoma and Texas, and really changed Alaska, which was always known for being pretty independent. We have privacy laws in our Constitution. We always admired and held up education and taking care of people. There was bonuses, longevity bonuses for elders, make sure they got a check every month so that they could stay at home when they got old or buy groceries. I mean, we did that. And then when the newer crowd came in, it all became about jobs in the oil industry, a lot of it, I think. And not that the oil industry has done good things, support the arts and all that, but it brought a different mindset. It brought one of highways and cars and big houses that overlook Alaska but aren't really in Alaska. It's just different. People that hunt with lots of machinery and don't actually go walking around in the woods looking for deer or sleeping in tents.
So in Alaska, isn't there you get the a little bit of a pay, I don't know what the correct terminology would be for it, but
the permanent fund dividend.
Yeah, for the oil companies then, yes?
Yes. What happened was when oil first started flowing from the North Slope, we had a governor, Jay Hammond, and Hugh Malone and Clem Tilley, and a bunch of our sort of founding political fathers, because obviously the native people are the founding people for here, but the state of Alaska founders in 1959, it's not that long ago. And then the 70s, of course, when this happened, they decided that the oil would belong to all of Alaskans, the resource does, like we do with all of our natural resources, fish, timber, oil, minerals. We all get the state gets a kick from that is distributed among everybody. But that it would be like a corporation, and that Alaskans were shareholders and get a dividend. So it is incorrectly, I think, by people in the lower 48 called, they're giving you money. They're not actually. It's a dividend from the oil revenue, and anybody that lives here gets one. It's about $1,000 a year, and it goes to every man, woman, and child. So a family of 5 gets $5,000. That, though, is there's a whole bunch of politics now involved in that, because the state doesn't have an income tax. The new governor is cutting services right and left, including the university and the ferry system, and preserving the holy grail of the permanent fund. And everybody's saying, wait a minute, couldn't we, there's got to be a better formula than this. We can't keep doing that and at the same time, cutting and not paying our own way. I think, and that's a big battle that is ongoing, and of course is always very emotional. So I don't know how it'll turn out. Personally, I'm happy to pay an income tax to keep the school running. I'm happy not to get as much of a dividend, but I have enough money to do that. And there's people, especially in rural Alaska, that dividend, they depend on it. And so, but you could make it a scale, so that you could still get a dividend if you made less than a certain amount, but if you made more, it was a wash and it went towards your income tax or something.
All right. Heather, Lende, thanks so much for your time. And as we tease the book one more time, we'll definitely put this in the description box of Beers in Ballots. It's right there in the corner. I'm pointing at the screen and nobody can see where I'm pointing. But anyways, it's in the right side of the screen. You can check it out. We'll definitely put it in the description box. And you do have a website, correct, Heather, too, if they want to buy the book from there?
Actually, you can buy the book wherever books are sold. I don't sell it off my website, but it's
Oh,
available everywhere. But my website is really easy. It's heatherlende.com, and you can find out more than you want to know about my writing, but also about Haines, and see pictures and, you know, little notes about the community. It's pretty, and it's free. It's just there. And I'm also very easy to contact through it.
Heather, thanks so much for your time. I greatly appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.